Hare Krishna. This is Madhavananda Das, your spiritual guide and well-wisher. We are having this special series on Kaveri Vaibhavam, the divine glories of Mother Kaveri. Before we begin today's session, I shall chant a few prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Prasida Kalyana Gunabhirame Prasida Kaveri Mama Prasida Prasida Kamadi Hare Pavitre Kaveri Mama Prasida. Hare Krishna. So I would like to welcome all the viewers for this special series on Kaveri Vaibhavam, where we have been trying to understand the divine glories and significance, the Mahatmya of river Kaveri, one of the topmost sacred rivers in this world. We have already heard about the wonderful glories of river Kaveri as described in the topmost Vedic scripture, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. Kaveri is one among the 7 great rivers mentioned in the Vedic scriptures. Gange cha Yamune chaiva Godavari Saraswati Narmada Sindhu Kaveri Jalesmin Sannidhim Kuru. So these are the 7 most sacred rivers, and Kaveri is one among them. It is also described in all the Vedic scriptures. Especially in the Skanda Purana, there is a separate section called the Kaveri Mahatmya or the Kaveri Purana, which extends from chapter 11 to 14 of the Sahyadri Khanda of the Skanda Purana. Likewise, Kaveri is also glorified in the Rig Veda. In fact, in the Rig Veda, there are 6 hymns which have been composed by Kaveri in her original form as Lopa Mudra. So, specifically, hymn number 179 of the Rig Veda is composed by Lopa Mudra. The original name of Kaveri is Lopa Mudra, and she is also mentioned in Yajurveda, chapter 17, 11th hymn, the text number 36, and in text number 20. The Brihad Devatakara, which is an Agama Grantha, chapter 4, text number 57 to 59, also explain about Kaveri. The Mahanarayana Valli of the Taittariya Upanishad, there is a prayer, a sukta called Aghamangshana Sukta, which also glorifies Mother Kaveri. It says, Imam me Gange Yamune Saraswati Shatadru Stomagam Sachata Parushniya Asikniya Marudhridhe Vitastaya Jikiye Ashnugrihya Sushomaya. The various sacred rivers mentioned in this verse of the Taittariya Upanishad, which is the Aghamangshana Sukta, are Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Shatadru, Parushni, which is in the modern times known as Ravi, and Asikni, which is Chinam, Vitasta, which is also known as Jilam, and Sushoma, and Marudvridha. Another name of Kaveri is Marudvridha, which is mentioned here in the Taittariya Upanishad. So there are 6 verses in the Rig Veda, the hymn number 179, in which the first two verses have been composed by Lopamudra or Kaveri, and the next 2 verses by Agastya. Agastya Maharshi is the husband of Kaveri or Lopamudra, and the next 2 verses, verses number 5 and 6, have been composed by the followers of Agastya and Lopamudra. So the first 2 verses which have been composed by Lopamudra or Kaveri are Pruviraham Shadaraha Shashramana Dosha Vasturashusho Jarayantihi Minati Shriyam Jarima Tanunamapyuna Patni Vrishano Jagamyuhu Ye Chidhi Purva Ritasapa Asansakam Devebhira Vadan Nritani Techid Avasuna Hyantam Apuhu Samunu Patni Vrishabhi Jagamyuhu. So these are the verses composed by Lopamudra as found in the Rig Veda. Likewise, many other Vedic scriptures also have the beautiful description and glories of Mother Kaveri. We should remember that Kaveri and all these divine celestial rivers have been described in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in the Vedic scriptures to have a very intimate relationship with the Supreme Absolute Truth, with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. And by offering prayers, by taking shelter of these divine rivers, who are originally divine personalities with a very intimate connection with the Supreme Lord, we become purified of all material contamination, and these divine personalities like Kaveri Mata can bestow upon us the highest benediction of Shuddha Bhakti or pure devotional service unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. So today we are also going to understand, we are also going to dive deep into the understanding of the original spiritual identity of river Kaveri. We can also see and directly experience the physical manifestation of river Kaveri. Kaveri, in her spiritual personality, is explained in the Vedic scriptures to be the creation of Agastya Maharshi as well as the consort or the wife of Agastya. She is also explained to be the daughter of Vidarbha Raja and also as the daughter of Kavera Maharshi. She is also the daughter of Lord Brahma, and even before that, she is actually Vishnu Maya, or an expansion of the energy of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. But as we go further and further into the spiritual identity of Kaveri Maya, the ultimate, the original form of Kaveri Mata can be traced back to the spiritual world in the Vaikuntha Loka, the Sarvopari, the topmost spiritual planet in the spiritual world. Vaikuntha is the Krishna Loka known as Goloka Vrindavana, where the Supreme Lord Radha Krishna are always accompanied by their divine eternal associates and engaged in the most intimate loving pastimes. So the Supreme Lord Radha Krishna are always served by Ashta Sakhis, or the 8 gopis of Vrindavana, who are mentioned in the scriptures as Lalita, Vishakha, Champakalata, Chitra, Tungavidya, Indulekha, and then there are twin sisters by name Rangadevi and Sudevi. So it is further described in the scriptures that the gopi by name Sudevi, who is one among the Ashtasakhis, the principal gopikas of Radha Krishna. Sudevi, again, each of the Ashtasakhis have got another Ashtasakhis who are their principal servitors. And among the 8 principal Sakhis of Sudevi Sakhi are Kaveri, Charukavara, Sukeshi, Manchukuhi, Harahira, Mahahira, Harakanti and Manohara Sakhis. It is also explained that Indulekha Sakhi, who also has got another 8 Sakhi or servitors, in the list of Indulekha Sakhis also, they are headed by Kaveri, Charukavara, Sukeshi, Manjukeshika, Harahira, Mahahira, Harakanthi and Manohara. So in this way, the original identity of Kaveri, even beyond the material realm, either as Agastya Patni or Vishnu Maya, ultimately in the spiritual world, the eternal spiritual identity of Kaveri is being a Sakhi of the divine supreme couple Shri Shri Radha Krishna. So there are many divine names ascribed to Kaveri Maiya. Some of the principal ones mentioned in the Vedas are Kaushitaki and Varaprada. And the original name of Kaveri, as mentioned in the Kaveri Mahatmya of Skanda Purana as well as in Mahabharata, is Lopamudra. Lopamudra literally means one who had been created by the mystic potency of Agastya Maharshi by taking the best of the features from the various living entities. So, Lopa means to become bereft of, so or to reduce or to take away from. So, Agastya Maharshi, with all his mystic power, he took the best from various living entities and created Lopamudra, who is Kaveri. There is also elaborate and extensive description of the glories and significance of river Kaveri in all the 18 Puranas. Let us quickly understand where the wonderful descriptions of Mother Kaveri are found in the various Puranas. Especially in the Skanda Purana, in Venkatachala Mahatmya chapter 25, there is the mention of river Kaveri. Likewise, in Kartika Masa Mahatmya chapter 4, Venkatachala Mahatmya also in chapter 24, and Vaishakha Masa Mahatmya in chapter number 4, and in Vasudeva Mahatmya chapter number 14, as well as chapter number 22, and then in Badarikashrama Mahatmya we find in chapter number 1 Vaishakha Masa Mahatmya chapter number 15, in Arunachala Khanda chapter number 12 and chapter number 2, and in Kaumarika Khanda in chapter 39, and in Setu Mahatmya chapter number 3, Venkatachala Mahatmya also in chapter number 1, and in Purvagdha in chapter number 2 and 6, and in Kartika Masa Mahatmya in chapter number 12. So this is the places where Kaveri Maiya, Kaveri Mata is mentioned, glorified and described in Skanda Purana. And likewise in Padma Purana, there is the description of Kaveri Maiya in Swarga Khanda, Kaveri Sangama Tirtha, chapter number 16, in Srishti Khanda, chapter number 11, in Uttara Khanda, chapter number 70, in Swarga Khanda, again in chapter number 6, in Bhumi Khanda, in chapter number 90, in Uttarakhanda chapter number 135 and 35, in Patala Khanda chapter number 47 and 97, in Swarga Khanda chapter number 39, in Bhumi Khanda chapter number 39, in Srishti Khanda chapter number 45 and chapter number 34. So this is in the Padma Purana. Likewise, in Garuda Purana, in chapter number 76 and in chapter number 81 and in chapter number 55, there is the mention of river Kaveri. In Brahma Purana, we find the description of Kaveri in chapter number 17, 61, 8, 53 and in chapter number 11. The Shiva Purana in Vidveshwara Samhita, chapter number 12, chapter number 20 in Koti Rudra Samhita, and again in Vidveshwara Samhita in chapter number 15. Then there is the Vishnu Purana, which describes and glorifies river Kaveri in chapter number 7, and in Narada Purana also Kaveri is glorified. In Brahmanda Purana, in Upodghata Pada chapter number 66, in Anushanga Pada chapter number 12 and chapter number 16, in Upodghata Pada again in chapter number 7 and chapter number 13, we find the description of river Kaveri. And in Brihat Samhita chapter number 4 and chapter number 5 and 14, we find the description of Mother Kaveri. In Bhagavata Purana, that is in Srimad Bhagavatam, we have already seen as mentioned in chapter number, in Canto 5, Canto 7, Canto 9 and in Canto 10, chapter number 5, 19, 13 and 79, we have the glories of Mother Kaveri. Then also in the Bhagavad Gita Mahatmya, there is in the description of the glories of chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita, we find the mention of river Kaveri. Then we also find in the Markandeya Purana in chapter number 57 and in chapter number 58 the mention of river Kaveri. There is also the description and mention of river Kaveri in the great Itihasas, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, especially in the Mahabharata, in the Lokapala Sabhakhyana Parva, in chapter 9 as well as in Markandeya Samasya Parva in chapter number 221 and in Jambu Khanda Nirmana Parva in chapter number 9 and also in Tirtha Yatra Parva of the third Parva, which is the Vana Parva of Mahabharata, from chapter number 95 to 98 is the wonderful history of the origin and pastimes of Lopamudra or Kaveri with Agastya Maharshi. So let us now try to understand the wonderful narration about the origin and the description of Mother Kaveri in Mahabharata. The Mahabharata, which contains a total of 18 parvas, and the third parva is known as Vana Parva. And in the Vana Parva, there is the Tirtha Yatra Parva. And here, from chapter number 95 to 98, is the wonderful history of river Kaveri. This story has been narrated by a great sage by name Lomasha Rishi to Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pancha Pandavas. Lomasha Rishi is a very, very special personality and a very great sage who is completely situated on the highest platform of total material detachment and renunciation or vairagya. He is described that Lomasha Rishi performed intense austerities or tapasya, and finally Lomasha Rishi was bestowed with the benediction of having a very, very long lifetime. His lifetime was benedicted that he would have a lifetime of as many Brahmas as there are hairs on his body. We can't even estimate the lifetime of one Brahma, which extends for 43,20,000 into 1,000 into 2 into 30 into 12 into 100. That is the calculation of the lifetime, the Ayushya of one Brahma. And we can't even estimate how many hairs are there on our body. So this figure multiplied by the number of hairs on his body was the lifespan of Lomasha Rishi. And after he was given this great benediction of such a vast lifespan, someone came and suggested to him that you are so detached that you have not even made an ashrama, you have not even made a hut for your residence. So now, since you have obtained such a great lifespan, at least now you can build an ashrama, a hut for yourself. And the response, the reply of Lomasha Rishi at that moment was that, why should I waste my time and energy in such a fruitless endeavor? Life is so short. So even this vast lifespan, this great time which Lomasha Rishi had obtained was considered by Lomasha to be a very, very short, like a flash in the pan, in compared to eternal time. So therefore, Lomasha is described to be one of the most renounced, detached spiritual personalities, and we find the Agastya Upakhyana, the narration of Agastya and Lopamudra described by Lomasha Rishi unto Yudhishthira. So long time back, Agastya Maharshi was performing his austerities at Gangadhara. Gangadhara is the present day Haridwara, which is located on the bank of river Ganga. And at that time, Agastya Maharshi, after a long period of tapasya and austerity, also felt the need. He was instructed by a divine command to produce children. And now to produce children, he also has to have a wife, he has to marry a wife. So then Agastya, he decided to create a most beautiful woman by the power of his mystic practices that he had performed. So Agastya Rishi, he took, by his mystic power, he took the most beautiful, the most graceful parts of the various creatures of the creation and created a most beautiful child. Just like he took the eyes of the doe, the deer, the grace of the panther, the slenderness of the palm trees, the fragrance of the champaka flower, the softness of the feather of a swan's neck, and in this way he took the most beautiful aspects and characteristics from the various creatures, and he produced this child who was supposed to be his consort in the future. But in order to for the sake of her maintenance, Agastya Rishi approached the king of Vidarbha and handed over this child to the king of Vidarbha for him to bring her up. The king of Vidarbha, who had been who had a long cherished desire to have a child, was also very happy to receive this very special child. And then he performed all the ceremonies for adopting and for bringing up this child. The many great sages and many personalities came, and at that time it is mentioned in the Mahabharata Vanaparva chapter number 95 in text number 21, that Abhyanandantatam sarve brahmana vasudhadipa lopa mudreti tasyascha chakrire namate dvijaha. The Namakarana, the naming ceremony of this child was performed, and at that time the great sages and the Brahmanas gave this child the name of Lopamudra. So, and in this way, Vavridhesa Maharaja Bibhrati Rupamuttamam Apsivotpalani Shighram Agneriva Shikha Shubha. In course of time, this very special child Lopamudra grew up in the palace of the king of Vidarbha, and when she came to her youth, Agastya became aware, and he again approached the king of Vidarbha and asked for for Lopamudra for her hand in marriage. So in this way, Agastya married Lopamudra, and Lopamudra now came to the ashram of Agastya Maharshi and started living there. It was a life now of great and intense austerity. Lopamudra was raised up in royal and luxurious comforts, but now she came to the ashrama of Agastya and began to serve without any duplicity her very great and exalted husband Agastya Maharshi. And after a long period of time, when Agastya Maharshi proposed to Lopamudra for a union to produce children, Lopamudra requested Agastya to gain a proper residence, to have some proper wealth before they have a child. So at that time, Agastya went out because he personally did not have any wealth. So he went out and he approached a king by name Shrutarvana, and he approached him, and King Shrutarvana received the great sage Agastya Maharshi with great honor and respect, and begged of him, requested him the purpose of the visit of Agastya. And Agastya then revealed, he also expressed, Agastya revealed that he wanted some wealth in charity, but only on the condition that if he had some excess of wealth which was in the maintenance of the kingdom, if it was excess, so between his revenue and expenditure, if it was excess of that, then he could give him charity. So then King Shrutarvana expressed that actually his revenue and expenses were sama or equal, and then Agastya contemplated that it would not be proper to put any citizen or anybody else in any kind of pain, and therefore he refused to take any charity from King Shrutarvana. But King Shrutarvana then took Agastya Maharshi to another king by name Vadhyashva. And there was again a similar situation with the financial condition of Vadhyashva, that his revenue and expenses were equal. And again Agastya, in order not to put any other living entities or citizens into trouble, he did not accept charity from King Vadhyashva. Then they went to another third king by name Trasadasyu, but even he had the same problem with his financial condition. And finally, all the three kings and Agastya, they decided the three kings suggested that actually there is a lot of wealth with a person by name Ilvala and Vatapi. Ilvala and Vatapi were two brothers, and the three kings suggested to Agastya Maharshi to approach Ilvala and Vatapi, and they definitely have a lot of excessive wealth. But actually these two brothers, Ilvala and Vatapi, had become very, very cruel Rakshasas, and they used to actually invite many sages and Brahmanas, and on the pretext of feeding them would actually kill them. So they had already killed many Brahmanas and sages, and the saintly persons were greatly troubled and afflicted by these two persons, that is Ilvala and Vatapi. The original place of Ilvala and Vatapi is also mentioned in the scriptures to be in the state of Karnataka, which is presently known as Badami. Badami in North Karnataka is actually the place of Vatapi, Ilvala and Vatapi, these two brothers. So Agastya Maharshi then went to the place of Ilvala and Vatapi, and again in their technique to kill the various sages that they had already done earlier, they invited Agastya Maharshi for a feast, and at that time Agastya, by his mystical power, he killed Vatapi and digested him. So now Ilvala became very anxious, and then he surrendered to Agastya Maharshi and offered a lot of wealth to Agastya. So Agastya took the wealth from Ilvala, came back to his ashram, to his dear wife, that is Lopamudra, and then in course of time, Agastya Lopamudra bore a child. Agastya gave an option to Lopamudra whether she would prefer to have a number of children, about 1,000 children of low quality, of low character, or she would prefer to have one child of great character. And Lopamudra chose to have one child with great exalted character. So that child of Lopamudra and Agastya Maharshi is mentioned in the Mahabharata to be Dridhasyu. Another name of Dridhasyu, the son of Lopamudra and Agastya, is Idmavaha. So this is the description of Kaveri as Lopamudra, the wife of Agastya Maharshi, and it is later described in the Skanda Purana that later when Agastya Maharshi came to the southern part of India, crossing the Vindhyachala mountains, crossing the Vindhya Parvata, at that time he stored Lopamudra in his kamandalu, in his water pot, and in one expansion he divided Lopamudra. Half of Lopamudra became the water in his water pot, in his kamandalu, and half of Lopamudra remained as his wife. So in this way, Agastya Maharshi came to the south of India, and he came to Sahyadri Parvata. Sahyadri Parvata are not different, are the same as the Western Ghats. So after coming to Sahyadri Parvata, how did Lopamudra transform into the most sacred and holy river is further described in Kaveri Purana, in Kaveri Mahatmya, which we shall hear in the next session. Please do like and share our videos, and please do subscribe to our channel. We shall again continue the description of Kaveri Vaibhavam, the wonderful divine glories of Kaveri Maya in the next session. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Kaveri Maya ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Bhagwan ki Jai. Hare Krishna.